President.
Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, before I speak to an amendment which is expected to be voted on later this afternoon, I want to take just a brief moment and thank my colleagues, the chairman of the Help Committee and his ranking member, Senator Murray, the work that they have done to knit together this compromise, and we all recognize that it is a compromise, is such an important one, and it comes at such an important time. It's not only good from a policy perspective to ensure that we don't kind of pull out the underpinnings on the individual market here, but it's good from the perspective of the health of our institution, to be able to demonstrate that at a time when things are a little tense, let's just say, on issues that are highly emotional, highly personal, and highly, highly complex, that we can come together, we can demonstrate the ability to govern. And it doesn't come without great patience and persistence. And these two individuals, these two leaders, have really helped guide us here in the Senate to find a better path, not only when it comes to how we deal with access to health care, reducing costs, reducing premiums, providing for better levels of care, but also a better path for the Senate. So I just want to acknowledge and show my genuine appreciation for their leadership. Mr. President, as chairman of the Energy Committee, I've come to the floor today to urge every member here to vote against Amendment 1301 that will be voted on later this afternoon. The FY18 budget resolution instructs the Energy Committee to raise $1 billion over the next decade. That's all that it does. It just says go out and find $1 billion over the next decade. And I will tell you, I appreciate Chairman Enzi's willingness to include this instruction, and I have every confidence that our committee will be able to meet the instruction. And there's good reasons why we should be able to meet it, and really very good reasons why we should oppose an amendment which would preemptively strike it. I think it's fair to say that we have opportunities within the energy sector to help advance this country when it comes to our energy security, our national security, and our economic security. But we need to be able to move forward with that. So what we are able to do within this instruction that is pretty wide open is to focus on those areas where we might be able to see increased energy production that could bring us new wealth, create new wealth in this country. So I'm going to be the first to agree that some of our options within this open instructions are better than others. Some will create jobs, some may end jobs. Some will reduce energy costs as opposed to raising them. Some will actually increase our energy and mineral security as opposed to sacrifice or selling it off. And so what I would hope that members would do is look at this instruction as an opportunity to do something constructive for the country. And the best example of that really is to expand energy development in our federal areas where we have seen decline in recent years. I think we recognize that responsible development not only will reduce our immediate deficits, but it's about jobs and job creation. It's about wealth and wealth creation, about allowing us to build new wealth and create prosperity. It will help energy affordability for our families and businesses, something that I hear about all the time. It will strengthen our national security and our competitiveness. And this is a point that needs to be emphasized over and over and over again. It's not only energy security, but it's national security. When we are vulnerable on other nations for our energy resources, there is an energy insecurity. But we also realize that energy production will ensure the type of growth that we need to finally begin reducing the federal debt, which is now over $20 trillion. But in short, what we will be able to do with this energy instruction is allow us to create new wealth. Why would that not be something that we would not all embrace? I think that the instruction will allow us to really see some enduring benefits that will be felt all across our country. And I think it's important to recognize and to state that this does not come at the expense of our environment. This is not an either-or proposition. Anyone familiar with modern development can recognize that, just as the scare tactic that it is. And Senator Sullivan, my colleague from the state of Alaska, was on the floor earlier this morning, and he spoke to the outdated, the stale arguments that we have heard repeated on the floor and why we must reject them. Now, the amendment that we have in front of us, 1301, simply strikes the section in the resolution that would provide for the Energy Committee instruction. But the purpose perhaps takes it a little bit further in mentioning and bringing out the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, ANWR. There's been a lot of discussion on the floor about ANWR already. Senator Sullivan, when he spoke earlier, spoke to the broader opportunities that we have seen in the Arctic with Arctic development in general. But I want to just raise a few facts about ANWR more specifically, since it's clearly been put out there for discussion. And as an Alaskan and one who has been part of these debates for many years now, not only here on the Senate floor, but in Alaska, we know what we're talking about when we discuss the issue of Arctic development. We know and understand what ANWR is, what the wilderness, where the wilderness area is, and what the 1002 area is. And I think it's important to put it into context. ANWR is an area of 19.3 million acres. It's about the size of the state of South Carolina. Included in this ANWR area is 8 million acres of federal wilderness. So you've got wilderness area, you have refuge area, but you have non-wilderness area designated as the 1002 area. That's this area on the coastal plain. This is an area of 1.5 million acres. Delaware is about 1.3 million acres. But the 1002 area is what was specifically set aside under ANILCA that would allow for consideration for its oil and gas potential. So when ANWR was established, it was recognized that there were areas that were appropriate for wilderness, and there were areas that were appropriate to be reviewed and considered for their exploration and production potential. And that's what we're talking about within the 1002 area. But even within this area that was specifically set aside, we are not asking to develop all of the 1002. We are asking to develop just 2,000 federal acres within it, effectively 1/10,000th of the refuge area. So you can't see it, but that little red dot is basically what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about, and we can say this. We can say we don't need to do more than 2,000 acres in this 19.3 million acre area that has been set aside specifically for oil and gas production because of what has happened over the decades with regards to our technologies, how we have worked to reduce the footprint since Prudhoe Bay opened nearly over 40 years ago. Well pads on the North Slope have shrunk by over 80% in these intervening years. We're talking now about pad areas that are 12 acres in size, 10, 11, 12 acres in size. So we've reduced the footprint dramatically, but what we have expanded dramatically is the subsurface reach. The new technologies have allowed us to increase the ability to reach out under the surface to an area 125 square miles. 125 square miles. We have increased by 4,000% in the years that we've been producing, exploring, and innovating up north. The technologies that we use for exploration, Senator Sullivan showed the ice roads that we use that reduce, again, the impact on the surface and avoid the need for permanent roads. We use forward-looking infrared cameras to survey for polar bear dens so that we can avoid them. There was actually a story just this spring about a polar bear that was denning. We found where she was by using the technologies that we know and literally working around where that polar bear was until she emerged from her den with her cub in the spring. It's working with the technologies that we have to allow for the activity, but with minimal disturbance to not only the land, but to the wildlife there. Caribou. We all know about the caribou up in the North Slope area. And what we have learned is that over the years, the caribou that occupy these areas have not suffered. In fact, they have thrived. When oil development first began, we were looking at herds in the numbers of about 5,000. Just this last year, the caribou herd is numbering about 22,000, and it has maintained steady and substantial levels. So when you understand what the 1002 area really is and what development would actually look like, it's not hard to understand why you have Alaskans' support. Over 70% of Alaskans support responsible development there. And I want to give you one of the best examples. Matthew Rexford is the president of Kaktovik Inupiat Corporation, KIC, which is a member of the Voice of the Arctic Inupiat. This is a group of community leaders from our North Slope. And he wrote a great opinion piece not too long ago explaining why he supports responsible development in the 1002 area. I'm going to submit his full comments for the record, but a very brief part of them provides as follows. As ANWR debates occur, the views of the Inupiat who call the area home are oftentimes left out. The wishes of the people who live in and around the refuge's coastal plain frequently are drowned out by people who live hundreds, even thousands of miles away, many of whom have never bothered to set foot anywhere near the Arctic. Well, today is a new day. And he goes on to speak as to the Voice of the Arctic Inupiat, which is members from across the Arctic slope who have voted unanimously to pass a resolution supporting oil and gas development in the 1002 area. He goes on further to state, when oil was first discovered on our land in 1969, the Inupiat were worried of industry activities, and we fought hard for self-determination to protect our subsistence resources. So we fully understand the trepidation from outsiders, the fear that the presence of industry on the coastal plain of ANWR could disrupt wildlife and affect America's manufactured perspective of our land and our culture. However, we also have the benefit of decades of experience working with the oil and gas industry to implement stringent regulations to protect our lands, and the industry consistently has lived up to our standards. Prudhoe Bay, the largest oil field on the continent, located 60 miles west of the coastal plain of ANWR, has demonstrated for 4 decades that resource development and ecological preservation can coexist in the Arctic. The oil and gas industry supports our communities by providing jobs, business opportunities, and infrastructure investments, has built our schools and hospitals, and has provided other basic services most Americans may take for granted. Our region recognizes its importance to our local and state economy, and we believe that development can be done responsibly in a portion of the 1002 area. We are not alone. Well, I'm with Matthew, and a strong majority of Alaskans are, and these are the voices that we need to be listening to. My answer on this discussion is yes. Opening the non-wilderness 1002 area to development is an option to meet the instructions to the Energy Committee, but it is not the only option. But I will tell you it is the best option, and it is on the table. But we should be clear. Amendment 1301 is not a vote to open the 1002 area or to keep it closed. It's about whether or not this instruction should stay in the budget resolution, and it's about whether or not we're going to recognize the substantial benefits that await us, or whether we're going to ignore our future energy needs and once again wind up in a situation where we see prices rising, families hurting, and everyone is wondering, why didn't you act when you had a chance? I think we all recognize that we're enjoying some benefits of lower energy prices, and some have suggested here that, hey, we're all fine. We don't need to do anything. Few have even said that because we're exporting oil now, we don't need to do more for ourselves here. Truly an open invitation to ignore the supply side. And that's just a bad idea. Quite honestly, we've been down that road before, and we know enough not to be in that place again. The EIA, the Energy Information Administration, projects that in 2040, the world's going to be using more oil, not less. And they project that our country will still be importing about 7 million barrels a day on a net basis. They project prices will be back above $100 a barrel. There's other experts that are already pointing to other signs. The International Energy Agency recently found that, quote, global oil supply could struggle to keep pace with demand after 2020, risking a sharp increase in prices unless new projects are approved soon. So my point here is we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity not only to help America, to create jobs, to allow for opportunities not only in my home state but around the country. We have an opportunity to ensure a level of energy security while at the same time broadening this to enhance our national security. So what I'm asking colleagues today is let's not preempt this very important conversation. Give us a chance to consider this instruction within our committee. We'll have an opportunity for hearings. We'll be able to put these options out on the table, understand more fully how we can do more when it comes to energy production in this country. So let the Energy Committee do its part in helping here. Let's not pull the plug even before we get going. And I think given everything that we've heard here on the floor about strengthening our economy and protecting the middle class, making life better for people that we serve, we really have to ask the very legitimate question, why? Why would you leave energy out of this debate? Why would we limit our opportunity to create new wealth in this country? So, Mr. President, I would again urge the Senate to reject this amendment. It would deprive us of a substantial opportunity to benefit our country and ensuring that we have great prospects and possibilities in front of us. The Energy Committee wanted to see this instruction in the budget resolution. I've got every confidence we can meet it, and so I would urge members to vote no on the motion to strike when that comes up later today. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.